Wait for the recording thing. There we go. All right. So one more video for 4-4, page 181, grouping. Let's pick out the grouping questions. So the first thing we're going to do is number 6. If you have many colors, now's your time to use them. I'm going to do my best. So number 6, the question is x cubed plus 4x squared minus x minus 4. Have to wait, the video is slow. Alright, so first of all, you know that it's grouping because there are 4 terms. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 terms. Eventually there we go. So once you realize there's 4 terms, you're actually going to start guessing. Usually it's set up this way. You are going to underline the first 2 terms. You're going to double underline the last 2 terms. We've now just grouped the first 2 terms together, and then we grouped the last 2 terms together. So you have to ask yourself, what do these 2 have in common? And the answer is x squared. So you write it down in front. You put parentheses, and you try to make your parentheses the same width as this first underline. Okay? It's important. So, what do they have in common? X squared. What's left over when we take out an x squared? So, x cubed, what's left over when we take out an x squared? X. With your eyes, you are distributing the x squared to the x to make sure it's x cubed. You're checking your work with your eyeballs. What's left over when we take the x squared out of plus 4x squared? It's plus 4. Okay? And then we go to the back, the double underline. We take a look at these 2 things and we think, what do they have in common? Now sometimes the answer is nothing, but if there's a minus sign, it's usually minus 1. So we take it out. And then we make parentheses that are as big as these 2 underlines, and we think, we took out what they have in common, so we want to know what's left over. So what's left over when we take a negative out of negative x? It's just x. What's left over when we take the negative out of negative 4? It's positive 4. So to recap, you had 2 questions, and you had to do it twice. You take a look at the first 2 terms. What do they have in common? What's left over? Last 2 terms. What do they have in common? What's left over? And now you ask yourself those 2 questions again. But this is one term right here in blue. X squared times the quantity x plus 4 is one thing. I know it looks confusing, but it's one thing. And then finally in green over here is another thing. So what do these 2 things have in common? They both have parentheses x plus 4. Right? Both the blue and the green have the quantity of x plus 4. So when I take this x plus 4 out of both of them, what's left over is x squared from right here and minus 1 from right here. So to recap, underline, double underline. Ask yourself, what do they have in common? Write it out front. What's left over goes in parentheses. What do they have in common? Write it out front. What's left over goes in parentheses. Looking at this line only, you ask yourself, what do they have in common? By the way, it better be the parentheses. If it's not the parentheses, you did something wrong, don't keep going, okay? What do they have in common? You write it one time. What's left over should be what's out front of the parentheses. All right, so we just grouped. End of grouping. But are we done with the problem? No. We have a dots right here, right? So we still have x plus 4. And since we realize we have a dots, we have x plus 1, x minus 1, and this is our answer. Okay, let's do one more problem. Number 7. I'm going to color code it a different way this time. Question for page 181, number 7 is 3y cubed plus y squared plus 9y plus 3. Underline the first two terms, double underline the second two terms. Ask yourself, what do they have in common? Put parentheses. What's left over? I still have a 3. I need an extra y. I'm using my eyeballs to make sure that y squared times 3y is 3y cubed. And I took this y squared and I put it down here, so I still have a plus 1. That's one reason why we need to make those parentheses just as big as the two terms. Plus, what do they have in common? They have a 3. What's left over? I took a 3 out of 9, so I still have a 3y. And I took this 3 and I put it there. I still have a plus 1. Alright, so what do these two things have in common? It looks like they have a 3y plus 1 in common. What's left over? Well, I didn't mention the y squared yet, and I didn't mention the plus 3, so that must be left over because they were outside of the parentheses. So here's your answer, but in case you don't believe me, we're going to check our work. So this isn't a dots, this isn't a difference or a sum of two cubes, it's not a quadratic form or a double dots, so this really is the answer, it's as far as I can go at least. So let's see, is this actually the same thing as that? So to do that, I'm going to take my answer and I'm going to FOIL it. 3y times y squared is 3y cubed. 3y times 3 is 9y. Inner, 1 times y squared is y squared. And last, plus 3. Now this isn't the exact same thing as the question, but if I just put it in descending order by switching these two terms, I can see that I checked my work because by foiling, I get the same answer as the question. All right, so that means this is the proper way to group.